My name is Mahado, and I'm the SWENext lead for FRC 2813.
Hi, I'm Navyaa. I'm the outreach lead for FRC 2854.
So our first question will be, what is your, please introduce yourself and what was your educational background and what's your job and what is it about?
Okay, so hi, I'm Alicia. Oh, let me wait for the mic first. So hi, I'm Alicia Aizpuru. Let's see, the first question was our educational background. So I went to Casa Grande High School up in Northern California. After that, I went to a junior college, Santa Rosa Junior College, while I kind of figured out what I wanted to do. And then after that, went to San Jose State University with a degree in chemical engineering. Currently, I work for DuPont as an application engineer, mostly doing thermal and optical analysis and characterization, and then more recently doing prototyping and fabrication for medtech.
Hi everyone, my name's Emily Blum. My educational background, I went to North Hollywood High School down in Los Angeles. I moved up to the Bay to do my mechanical engineering bachelor's at UC Berkeley. And currently right now, I'm a mechanical design engineer at Tesla working on the drive units team in the powertrain org. And I work on the cooling and lubrication team doing mechanical design.
Hi, my name's Becky Cooney, and I took a rather unconventional route in my education. I graduated high school in Cleveland Heights, and then I moved out to Colorado, and I worked as a graphic designer, and moved into QA for, tech support, and then QA for a company that made software that graphic designers used. From there, I went to UC Santa Cruz, and I studied marine biology with a focus on endocrinology. And now I work as a QA engineer for Tide Pool. We make software for people with diabetes. So it all kind of comes back around in a weird way.
Okay, so my first question would be, what inspired you to pursue a career in engineering?
So let's see. I'd probably say, So I don't have a lot of engineers in the family, but I did have a brother who is about 9 years older than me and was going to school for engineering. And he kind of, in trying to figure out what I wanted to do, asked me what I enjoyed about the classes I was currently taking, which obviously were kind of like the math, sciences, the typical kind of STEM-related classes. But I had a chemistry teacher who was very hard, but very passionate about what she did. So I think my junior year was when I kind of scheduled some time with her just to ask her what her career was or how she got to where she was. And I think just hearing her passion behind it, and at that time kind of loving chemistry as well, kind of found a way to blend these all together and then pursue a degree in engineering after that.
I first started thinking about a career in engineering. I actually did FRC in high school, and that kind of is how I got into the mechanical engineering field. I first learned CAD and hands-on engineering and really enjoyed it. I got interested in robotics after taking my first physics class in 8th grade, and quite frankly, I really sucked at it. But there was something super exciting about learning how to view the world from that perspective and from a physics standpoint that really thought, this is a practical way to apply what I enjoy about math and science. And so I kind of just honed in and figured out what sort of engineering I wanted to do while doing FRC. I really enjoyed the mechanical aspects of it, the hands-on aspects of it, and kind of bringing products to life. And so that's how I decided to pursue my degree. I really enjoyed the courses I took in my undergrad and decided that this was the career that I wanted to pursue.
How did I end up in engineering? Well, I always loved math and sciences. That was always something that I enjoyed. In high school, my favorite classes were graphic design and AP biology. So I knew that I loved that aspect of things. My dad was a software a programmer, and I did not want to do that because that was what my dad did. But I did join the National Ski Patrol, which tied in a lot with AP Bio and was part of why that class was so much fun. But one of the things that taught me was a lot of critical thinking skills and troubleshooting, and learning to kind of think of things from different angles and try and figure out what could be the problem. And I think that was really part of what brought me to engineering and what made me very good at doing tech support, because I was able to troubleshoot and figure out what someone's problem was. And I used those same skills as a QA engineer to figure out, okay, this is what the product was designed to do, but let's figure out what happens when it's used in ways it's not intended to be used, and see what happens and try and find problems.
So my first question is, what are some of the biggest challenges you face as a woman in engineering, and how did you overcome them?
So I may not be the best one to answer this question, in the sense that the company I'm at right now has a great team of women engineers. In fact, I think we're more than 50%, maybe more like 60% on our team, which is pretty awesome. That's not always the case. But at my previous company, when I was in quality, I think a big factor that plays into it is sometimes the company, sometimes the people, and where I was before, it was more male dominated. In fact, I don't think they had a single person or a single woman on their team. And so trying to kind of push that boundary and tell them, like, hey, based off my experience, like, this is, I think you need a process engineer, this is what I'd be doing. But changing that mindset for some people can be hard. So being persistent, there was a point where there was like a little glimmer of light that, they would kind of be more open to that. But it did, for me, unfortunately, get to the point where, I kind of wanted to push myself forward and look for a different job and another company that kind of fostered that type of environment.
Yeah, I think with like a background in mechanical and now in the automotive industry, it's like very disparate in terms of like women versus men. I think that's been a challenge for me throughout my engineering career, is just a lack of role models in maybe like higher positions or senior engineers, and that continues to be a challenge for this day. So I think kind of shifting my mindset, even like now in today's modern engineering world where we have a better split of women and men, like shifting the mindset towards like, maybe I can't find a role model, but I need to be one. And so just kind of having that kind of weight on yourself has been a bit of a challenge, but something that I kind of embrace, that like even in today's engineering space, I can kind of make a difference by doing events like this or reaching out to people in the community and just showing face in the workplace to kind of be one of the few women engineers in a career that is still very much dominated by men.
So the company I work for, Tidepool, is a nonprofit organization. I joined in the end of 2017, and at the time I was the only woman at the company. There were only 13 employees. I was the only woman. But one of the things that was important to me is that, in addition to being very passionate about Tidepool's mission, listening to our CEO talk about how the team that we had didn't reflect the team that he wanted. And so in the time since 2017 when I joined, we now have 50% of our executive leadership being female. 45% of the company is female. So part of that was just getting involved, being involved with hiring. I think the first two people that I was involved in hiring were both women. And within a couple years after I started, I was seeing the difference that made in the company and the the dynamics, and it's been really important to see that and know that that was what was always intended.
Can you share your journey and key milestones in your engineering career?
Okay, let's see. So my journey, so probably engineering specifically. So when I was at, I worked at a winery, so that was more quality related, but that was kind of when I worked a little bit with the engineering team on kind of process improvement projects. So that was kind of the integration of those two fields. I would say my current job and company, I've been an engineer there the entire time, and so that has been very challenging but rewarding in the sense that, you know, you're constantly trying to stay on top of, you know, what the newest thing is, making you and also your company relevant. So, you know, DuPont does a lot of consumer electronics, automotive, thermal management, and so kind of being very versatile too. So although my degree is in chemical engineering, you do a lot of other types of engineering as well. So I think being well-rounded allows you to move a little bit more easily and kind of find your passion or what kind of sparks interest for you.
Yeah, I think I had like a subtle passion for EVs and kind of hybrid vehicles from when I was young. And so with that, I thought that maybe I would go towards like a sustainable energy role where I maybe worked on like solar panels or battery technology. And I kind of went into college thinking that I would go into that. And then I happened to, like kind of on a whim, join the FSAE team at school, which is a project team that builds race cars every year, and that's kind of how I got into the automotive industry. I wouldn't say it's necessarily like my passion and what I see doing for the rest of my career, but I think the day-to-day job is super fulfilling, being able to kind of innovate and create projects from scratch where you kind of stare at a blank screen and then a few months later you get to actually see that product. And so that's kind of where I am, and I'm in like a good place in terms of growing my career, learning a ton, and hopefully continue to use those skills that are transferable to maybe try out other fields in the future, like biotech or aerospace or any of the other wonderful opportunities that you can do as a mechanical engineer.
My milestones are a little bit different. So because I went back to school later and already had a QA background from the work that I did at a software company, I really wanted to focus more on biology. And again, I focused on endocrinology, which ended up being a very important thing for me because my daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. When that diagnosis happened, the doctors were very careful to not say diabetes. But I was looking over the nurse's shoulder when they checked her blood sugar, and based on my ski patrol background, I knew she has diabetes. I was introduced to Tide Pool by the certified diabetes educator at the hospital in our very first pump class. And we started using the Tide Pool software because it was the best way to view her data. And I got information from it that helped us tweak how she managed her diabetes to make things easier for her. When she switched insulin pumps, that data could no longer be uploaded to Tide Pool. And I had to go back to using subpar tools. So when an opportunity arose to join the QA team at Tide Pool, my goal was to make sure that her new pump could be uploaded to Tide Pool so that we could view her data again and start getting that flow of information that we were used to before. And that was what we did, and eventually, yes, that pump could be uploaded. And then Tide Pool made the decision to take the DIY loop system that was being used by people off-label and submit that, run that through our quality system and submit that to the FDA. And that was what we did. And in 2023, Tide Pool Loop became the first IAGC FDA cleared device, standalone device. It's not available to the public yet, but that is what I'm working on. And I think one of my big milestones will be when it is being used, Tide Pool Loop is being used on people, not just DIY Loop. And that will be one of the really big milestones in my career.
What are some tips you would provide to a high school student who are considering a field of engineering?
Yeah, let's see. So tips, probably just, really focusing on what is sparking your interest. I think also being persistent, or some people have this idea that I have to be, the A+ student in chemistry and the A+ student in math and the A+ student in science or whatever class you're taking, but also giving yourself a little bit of grace and understanding that, sometimes it takes some time to understand a concept, or, there's trig, geometry, calculus. Sometimes one of them is going to be harder than the other. So I think just sticking with it and just remembering, as long as you keep going at it, that you'll get there. Just give yourself that grace to get there.
Yeah, I also kind of want to echo that with trying to explore all sorts of opportunities, not just in terms of engineering clubs at school, but also those that might contribute to skills that will still be useful to engineering in the future. For example, I did speech and debate for a few years. I think having that public speaking practice has been super useful for engineering and an underrated skill that you could bring to your career. Along what Alicia was able to say, I think give yourself some grace in terms of really stressing yourself out over grades. I think one thing I noticed in doing the college application process is they really stress a spark. And I think if you're able to find that in high school, your spark being something that you're super passionate and super amazing at, then more power to you to be able to find that, but don't put yourself in a stressful situation thinking that you need to find that at such a young age. I think it's important to just try out as much as possible while you have the opportunity to explore everything and you have the time and you have the energy to, and then eventually you can kind of move towards what you think is best and pivot later if you need to. I think, give yourself some grace there.
I think we're all in agreement about being kind to oneself and not expect to have all the answers while you're in high school, because you have time. Things don't always work out exactly the way you want them to or the way you expect them to, and that's not a bad thing. I definitely did not take a traditional path after high school, and I'm sure that scared the living daylights out of my parents. But if you have drive, you can find that passion, and knowing that I did have those strengths and the troubleshooting skills that I learned when I was in high school, and those are going to serve me my entire life in so many different ways, not just engineering, although it very much does, but throughout life, having troubleshooting skills will come back and help in all aspects of things. And it just may take some time to find that spark, but that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you do find it early, fantastic. But it's not, there shouldn't be so much pressure to find it.
Have you ever experienced gender bias in your career, and how did you And if yes, how did you handle it?
Yeah, so I'd say, unfortunately, gender bias can be not just in your career, but even early stage. I know I had some experience of that even in college. Some people kind of undermining or quickly, I guess, overriding what you're saying. So I think trying to still be not rude but assertive about your skills, your capabilities. And yeah, you'll still experience that sometimes in a career as well, where I've been in situations where somebody thought that I was lower than the title that I was, assuming I was like assisting somebody as opposed to being the lead on something. And then having to kind of step up and say like, hi, I'm Alicia, I'm the engineer here, I'm working on X, Y, and Z. So you do kind of have to build up a little bit of confidence, and I think it takes time, but yeah, unfortunately you will experience it, but I think as the experience happens and you take notes and each time you get more and more confident to kind of stand up and present yourself, so yeah.
Yeah, I think I've been really fortunate to not encounter like explicit bias against myself, but I do think something that I've seen both in college and in my career as well is that, going back to my point earlier about I guess role models and mentors in the same technical position that I'm in, not finding a lot of them. I think you get in your own head and think, maybe I should pursue something that's a bit more on like the program management side or the more organizational logistics side. I think implicitly women kind of tend to get funneled into that because maybe they see other women in those positions. And so I think kind of going back to what I'm passionate about and thinking like I really want to stay on a very technical path and kind of staying true to that and gaining the self-confidence to be able to continue with that has been something that I'm still working through, but learning how to build confidence in becoming a mechanical design engineer and not maybe pivoting more towards a management side.
I used to do phone tech support. Have I experienced gender bias? Yes. I definitely had some customers who I would talk to who would ask me to talk, if they could talk to an engineer because they assumed I wouldn't be able to help them. And if there had been a way that I could have forwarded the call to an engineer and listened to the engineer tell them, ask someone in tech support, why on earth would I know that? I would have, but unfortunately that was not possible with our phone system. I was very lucky that I did theater in high school and was able to stay calm in those situations and sort of figure out the best way to reach those people. And sometimes that involved playing the ditz and saying, oh, maybe you're right, maybe I don't actually know, but can you just humor me? Can you just try this? And of course, fix their problem, because of course I know how to fix that. That's what I've been trained to do. And, sometimes that was the best way to handle things. Sometimes being assertive was the right way to handle it. It just depended on the situation. If it's someone that you're going to be interacting with again, then the just humor me attitude, that's not gonna work because you don't wanna set yourself up for doing that again and again. In a phone tech support situation where I'm never gonna talk to this person ever again, that was the fastest way to deal with it. But when you're talking about interactions with people you'll see again, then being assertive is the best way to handle it so that they will eventually learn to trust you, and if they don't, escalate, because it's too important not to.
What has been the most rewarding aspects of your career in engineering?
Let's see. So, Most rewarding. So I guess maybe a more recent project that we've worked on in the larger DuPont, we're all over the world. Our site specifically in Silicon Valley is kind of more customer facing, but we're also for quick prototyping and fabrication. So I had actually just come back from maternity leave and was taking over a project for a friend. And they're like, hey, we have all these materials. We need you to kind of put a patch together to go with this device. And like, fingers crossed, hopefully it works. And so being able to very quickly jump onto a new project, come up with all the processing conditions, the fabrication conditions, and then creating this patch that was going to be connected with a device to collect ECG and SEG data, and then to eventually hook it up and see that it was working and, see those nice little kind of curves and everything, I think was the most rewarding, especially because our site had never been in the medtech space. As I mentioned before, we have like an RF lab, an optical lab, a thermal lab. Medtech was, I would say, probably new within the last year and a half. So being able to be a leader in starting that platform at our site was probably super exciting and super rewarding.
Yeah, for me, I've kind of had the great opportunity from the start of working at Tesla to be put on like a really cool project. I'd say 90% of my work is on the new robotaxi platform. It's super fulfilling to like see people at the reveal event and get excited about the technology that you're working on designing every day. And so that's been fulfilling to me. We've gone through many design cycles where we'll scrap something and start from the beginning, and I think that is something that I mentioned earlier that is so fulfilling about working on physical products is being able to see it as quite literally like a sketch on a 2D screen and then get prototypes, be able to validate it, be able to see it come to life. Of course, there's a lot of problems that come with that and like problem solving and working through that and really like developing a robust product. Is a really fulfilling experience to be able to kind of nurture that as like your baby, as your product that you're bringing to production, and to see everybody excited about that thing you're bringing to production is a really amazing opportunity, especially early in my career. So, yeah.
One of my roles at Tidepool is that I tend to be the QA person for the design team, as well as testing the actual software. I help the designers with the designs and figuring out how the product is going to work. And I love doing that. That is, it kind of ties into my, passion for graphic design when I was younger, and I love trying to make sure that things are as intuitive as possible for people to make it as easy for them as possible. And I think one of the most rewarding things that has happened in the last few years was when some of the user interface changes that we made for Tidepool Loop got merged into the DIY Loop community. And when my daughter updated Loop and had the new UI on her phone for her diabetes management, that was a big milestone for me. And yeah.
Who were your role models or mentors, and how did they influence your career?
So I think, as mentioned before, kind of the chemistry teacher that I had in high school was probably my biggest inspiration. Like, she just had so much enthusiasm and excitement, and I think just to see that, hey, you can be that passionate about, your career and where you go. I think mentorship-wise, I've actually worked for a lot of companies that provide mentors of all sorts, whether that's internal or external. So I've had, when I was in quality control and quality assurance, I had a manager who connected me with another winery to kind of learn from her. And then at DuPont, they also do internal programs to connect you with other leaders, or maybe, I think the mentor that I had was procurement. And as a chemical engineer, I never thought, how would you end up in procurement? But her background was in chemical engineering. So learning from her and how to pivot and stay relevant and still find your passion within the company. I think being able to find someone you look up to, and use them as a light.
Yeah, my family is not from an engineering background, so for me, a lot of my role models would be like those who were maybe a year or two older than me in school, and I kind of was able to become friends with them, get to know them as people, and then see them kind of grow into their careers. And I just thought that was a really cool opportunity to kind of follow their path super closely, especially in college, like kind of becoming friends with people and then seeing them like grow into their careers and then staying in touch with them once they're able to start those careers has always kind of presented opportunities for me and has been a great way to kind of learn really intimately what their day-to-day is like.
So when I was younger, I would say some of my first role models were probably the ski patrollers, because my dad joined ski patrol when I was very young. So I grew up with them and I looked up to them, and the focus on biology and first aid was always something that interested me, which was why I joined when I was 14 and the earliest I was allowed to. And other mentors would have been my high school AP Bio teacher, who was fantastic. When I started working at the software company that made graphic design software, they had a training program for the tech support people, and everyone did have a mentor there. And she was wonderful, and that inspired me to become a mentor in the years following that, so that I would mentor new employees as well. When I started at Tide Pool, I didn't really have a mentor. It's such a small company that just didn't really happen. And I have tried to be a mentor for new people as we have expanded, and yeah.
How do you see the role of women in engineering evolving over the next decade?
I would say it looks great. I think having some family members and talking with some people who have either been in the engineering field currently or in the past. My mom actually worked for Northrop. She did not have an engineering background, but kind of trained herself. And then she said, I was again kind of one of those one out of X amount of men. And so I think as the years go, we're kind of seeing that change over time, going from 1% to 10% to 20 to 25. I think even talking to some other alums from San Jose State, kind of seeing the different departments, so chemical engineering, aerospace, mechanical, seeing these shifts. Before it was kind of off to one side, a handful of women and a lot more men. With each graduating year, you're kind of seeing that even out a little bit more over time. So I think it looks great. I think we'll see more women in engineering and hopefully in higher roles as well.
Yeah, I think the percentage of women studying engineering and in the workforce is definitely growing. I've noticed that particularly in a growing field like AI or software, especially in the Bay Area, I think that's where we're going to see a lot of the shifts in ratio of men to women in the field. Like at UC Berkeley, for example, the number of women and men pursuing computer science degrees is almost 50-50 now. And so if they're matriculating into these really kind of high profile roles and a really expanding tech genre, that I think we will kind of see that slowly shift over time in the next 10 years or 5 or the next year or so. I think it'll grow really quickly.
I hope that it will grow really quickly. We have seen a shift from the way it was when I was in college, when I graduated high school to now. There's been a huge shift, and there has been there's a much closer ratio of men to women in colleges and in engineering fields. I don't think we can become complacent about that. I think that there are other forces that are kind of trying to undercut that. And I think that we need to make sure to keep encouraging people and keep encouraging young women that if it is what interests you, then engineering and STEM and tech is absolutely the right place for you to be. If that is what you want, then yes, that is where you should be.
What strategies do you use to maintain work-life balance, especially in a demanding field like engineering?
All right, work-life balance. I feel like that's always an ongoing, struggle, especially, you'll have projects where you're kind of overworking and then you'll get lulls and you'll find this kind of like wave. But I think also being, I'm trying to think, like, one, knowing your outlets. So if you have a hobby that kind of helps you de-stress, or, whether that's hiking and extracurricular activity, sticking to those and remembering to do that. One thing that I do, which not everybody has, it is annoying to carry around 2 phones, but I do have a work phone and I have a personal phone. At one job, I use my personal phone as a work phone. That can be frustrating, so you'll get calls, at random hours asking for a response for something. Although I still check my work phone at home, it is easier for me to kind of detach from that and say, okay, I'm at home, I'm with my family, I need to be present. And then, when my daughter goes down or my husband's doing this, okay, if I need to check an email really quick. So really sticking to the boundaries that you set, and as long as they're not unreasonable, and I don't always think you have to answer a 9 p.m. phone call, but sticking to those boundaries to just keep that balance.
Yeah, I think engineering in particular is tough for work-life balance because a lot of our job is problem solving, and that is a lot of thinking that happens in your head. And so I would find times where my mind would drift and then I'd start thinking about a problem at work, and I think I've learned to just kind of hone in and say, like, stop thinking about that. You're not on the clock. It can wait for tomorrow. There are the ups and downs of work where you have really busy times and you have really off times. So I think making sure that you recognize that when it's busy, you're doing so for a short period of time, and when it's not busy, really like sinking into that and understanding like this is the time to rest. And then also setting those physical boundaries. I work in the office 5 days a week. That helps a lot with making sure that I'm doing work at the office and not doing work when I'm not at the office. And then also like setting restrictions on my notification times. Like, I will not get a message after a certain amount of time in the evening, and I won't get a message on weekends. So like I might be getting messages now, I will not receive them because I'm here right now. So like I just like setting those boundaries for yourself and recognizing that when you're at work, a lot of the problems will be stressed as really important. It needs to get done now, but I think people tend to over-exaggerate how exactly important and time urgent they are. So kind of recognizing that and setting your own boundaries for every project that you have.
Setting boundaries is always a struggle. I know it's something that a lot of teenagers are struggling with, and to be honest, a lot of adults are still struggling with it too. Tidepool is entirely a remote company. We do not have an office, so everyone does work from home. And that means that if I wanted to be working at 10 p.m., I certainly could. I don't most of the time. But there are times where if there's something that's happening during the day, I do have that flexibility to say, okay, I'm going to go mentor the robotics team now. So I am going to leave work early because this is when I'm needed at the school to mentor robotics. And if I work another 2 hours later in the evening, that's fine too, because it allows me to be able to be there for my kids and the robotics team. And I have that flexibility because of that. And I'm very fortunate to be at a company that is very understanding. And when there are pushes like there's a deadline for information that needs to get back to the FDA, that might be an all hands on deck moment where we are working late hours. But I'm very fortunate that our team is also very understanding, and they recognize that if we are doing that, then that means the next day I may not be working because I've already put in those hours before. And it's just important to remember that, and remember that family is more important.
How do you stay motivated and inspired in your work?
So I feel like sometimes the work motivates me, or like what the end goal is. So I think staying motivated, but in the sense that sometimes there's this new idea, we'll collaborate, like, oh, that'd be great if we could do X, Y, and Z with this new project. And then I think everybody just gets excited about it. And I think being able to know that we can put this like physical item together in front of us and see like all of the hopes and dreams that you had for a product or even for an application kind of come true. So seeing that end goal, I think really motivates you through each milestone, because like you've mentioned before, sometimes there's multiple iterations of, getting to one goal, and you might have to scrap it and start over, but still having that end goal in mind of where that's going to go or who's going to use it maybe is kind of where the motivation for me happens.
Yeah, I think it's important to zoom out in order to recognize exactly what you're contributing your work towards. Like, I think on the day-to-day it can get really granular. Like, maybe I'm doing calculations for like a tiny little O-ring, and that might be boring, and you might think like, what's the point? But if you kind of zoom out and say like, I'm making an O-ring for a heat exchanger, which belongs to a drive unit, which belongs to this robotaxi, then you could say like, wow, it's really important because this contributes to the overall mission of the company or whatever we're trying to accomplish. So I think when things get stressful, like recognizing that you are a piece of a really big puzzle that is amazing, I think that can kind of bring motivation in times when you're feeling a bit burnt out. But I think also going back to the work-life balance question of like, there will be ups and downs of when you're really busy and when you're not busy, like recognizing that if you are in a period where you feel a bit burnt out, that it's temporary and that you'll feel great on the other side of that.
I work on a closed loop insulin pump system. So my motivation is sitting in the audience here, and it's about making software to make diabetes management easier for people. Because right now she's using a DIY system, and not everyone has access to that. So having something that will be able to be prescribed by doctors, where people can download the application from the App Store and have access to it without having to build it themselves, that is inspiring, that it will be able to help so many more people. And our company is a nonprofit. We're very mission oriented, and this is the mission. And that's my inspiration, is just that this is going to help so many people.
What advice would you give to young women considering a career in engineering?
Yeah, I think as mentioned before, kind of just pursuing a passion, and whether there's, you're worried about the gender bias, or, are you going to be the one girl in your unit ops class, or, whatever it is just saying, yeah, if I'm passionate about this is what I want to do. Or even, when I was in high school, maybe even college, I wasn't like, this is the job that I want. I was like, I like what this degree can help me do. There's a lot of opportunities. So I think just like keeping your eyes open and understanding that like it's gonna ebb and flow. It's not always this like direct pathway to these are the things I'm gonna do and I'm gonna end up here. Like let yourself zigzag a little bit to kind of get to something that you're really enjoying and passionate about.
Yeah, I think my advice would be to like take advantage of as many opportunities as possible and be proud of taking those opportunities. Like I made a conscious decision back in middle school to take a physics class. I made a conscious decision to try out for the robotics team. And at the time, those were like really scary opportunities that might not have panned out for me, especially because of like the gender disparity involved with it. But like I am so grateful in my present day that like I took that chance on taking the harder class, or I took the chance to put myself out there and apply to things. So I think like kind of taking pride in the opportunities that you try to pursue, and also really pushing yourself to try things that are harder. I think that's really important.
I absolutely agree with both of those sets of advice, to take as many opportunities as you can, be persistent, and don't be afraid to work hard. Just because something doesn't come easily right away doesn't mean it won't become your passion. So trust that gut instinct, and if it is something you want to pursue, be persistent.
What are some skills do you think are most important to be successful in engineering?
If I had to throw out one, probably versatility. I think people that I've personally seen, so different experiences, but sometimes the more stuck you are on something, you get stuck and it's hard to get out. If you're able to say like, okay, I have to go slightly this way and go around. So being versatile, whether that's, on a project, on just what you want to do, even if that's like, hey, I really liked chemical engineering and I want to do mechanical, like allow yourself to kind of pivot a bit and try new things, put yourself out there and see where it goes.
Yeah, I think adaptability as well as like scrappiness, I think in my field at least, is like a really great skill to have. That's something that I think I learned from like FRC and robotics. A lot of the stuff that I learned and did there is applicable to like my work today. And so learning how to like come up with a solution or a path towards one in any way possible, I think is really valuable, and someone in the future will see you as a problem solver and someone who's not afraid to tackle these things. I think as well, like I had highlighted communication earlier, just being able to talk to people and be able to bounce ideas and not have shame to want advice from others is something that's really important to develop, because a lot of problems come up in engineering when people aren't able to communicate with each other. And so there's like the technical aspect of problem solving, and then there's also like how well do you work in a team, which is something else that you learn from all these project teams in high school and college.
I would say critical thinking skills and creativity, because that creativity is important for troubleshooting and figuring out a different solution to a problem that many people might not think of. So don't underestimate the creativity.
How can organizations better support women in engineering roles?
So hiring more women, but I think also something great about the company that I work with, and I was a part of it when I was in college too, which is SWE, which is the Society of Women Engineers. So I was part of that in college, and then the membership was free, but they had some really great resources. But I had a coworker who was telling me, like, are you not still a member? Do you know that the company actually helps pay for your membership? So they'll cover it in full. And actually our company sponsored for some of us to fly out to Chicago for the larger annual event, where it's, I think like 3 or 4 days, and you get to like network, meet other women. They have a bunch of great talks about imposter syndrome, or how to use AI to understand certain things, or networking. They have different groups, and so finding a company that really like fosters that and appreciates that, and then also helps like implement that and give those resources to the employees as well. So look out for those, whether it's in high school, college, or even after. I think they're great resources.
I think establishing mentorship programs is really important. Like connecting with someone who is in a position that you want to be, even if they're only a few years older, is really important. And I've found that any organization that attempts to make a really established and robust mentorship program where you pair people together who have the same vision for what they want in their career has been like really valuable in my experience. And I think like SWE is a really great organization that puts together a lot of these mentorship opportunities. So I think companies partnering with these organizations and trying to collaborate on resources to put together these programs is something that can benefit a lot of young women in the field.
I know that there are organizations such as SWE that will help provide those mentorship opportunities, and I think that that's fantastic. Having women in the executive boards of companies is really important too, and sort of in ways you can somewhat choose what company to work for, kind of keeping those things in mind. And that wasn't the case at Tidepool when I started, but again, nonprofit, very, very small, mission driven. And that mission, of course, attracted more people. And then it was just a matter of, hiring practices and making sure that when you are involved in hiring committees, that you're kind of keeping the diversity of the team in mind.
What steps can the industry take to encourage more diverse and inclusivity?
Yeah, so I think, as mentioned before, kind of like mentorship programs, other steps is like you said as well, kind of keeping the diversity of the team and being aware of that when it comes to hiring or opportunities, making sure that you're giving equal opportunities, making sure that people who also have an open mind are in those higher positions, because they're the ones who are going to look out and implement these things. And if it's not like that, it can be hard, but being able to kind of stand up and try to move things forward with that company. But the hope is that they are keeping that in mind as they're building a team, whether it's engineers or just, the CEOs, whoever it is, the whole company needs to think in that way.
Yeah, I kind of want to echo that. Like, hiring is really important, and having a conscious effort to look for diverse talent is what's ultimately going to get us to like a better position in terms of the women and men ratio, because that's kind of what mentorship programs are, is like finding people who are where they are today and then people who want to get to that point. And I think you will have a short supply of mentors if you don't get them to those positions in the first place. So I think in terms of like maybe not your career, so like hiring would be equivalent to maybe like people who are captains for the robotics team, or people who are like presidents for like a club organization. So like putting yourself in those positions where you're able to make decisions so that you can consciously try to be more diverse maybe in your recruiting efforts will help for sure.
I don't think I have more to add on this question.
Can you share a project or accomplishment that you're particularly proud of?
Yes, I think probably when I was doing quality control at the winery, I think why I'm most proud of it was something that wasn't asked of me. It was just something that I was like, hey, I learned this great skill when I was in college. I used Visio or SolidWorks to put, floor plans together. And so part of a winery is also bottling. You have a bottling line, which means swabbing for microorganisms, you're looking for yeast or bacteria when filling up the wine bottles. And so basically you go through with a swab at certain locations and then report out. And so it was like a fun little side project was kind of building this map of our bottling lines and then incorporating it with this other software where it'll collect that data and then basically highlight like your red zones, your green zones. And then this became part of the process for kind of reviewing data at the end of each month. So you'd have this whole floor plan with like glowing lights of like green, we're doing great here, or like red, something's not right. Either the filters are breaking down, we need to change them out quicker, or changing the sanitation process, whatever it is. But became a very great visual for a lot of people, the line operators doing that job. And again, I think because when you are passionate about something, you also find these other little like projects where it's not asked of you, but you can see how it's going to greatly impact the team and their productivity.
I think back and I'm actually really proud of what I was able to do on my FRC team in high school. Back when I was doing FRC, the seasons for building was 6 weeks. And I think back and I'm like, well, you know, none of us actually had degrees in engineering. We barely came in with experience. And the fact that with little resources in terms of mentorship, with little financial resources and even like physical space, we were able to build something that moves and is controllable and we can compete. I think it should not be understated how amazing an opportunity to be on an FRC team is, because that opportunity to interact with engineering at like honestly quite an impressive scale at such a young age is something that you will carry forward for many more years than you realize.
Well, I've already talked about Tide Pool Loop getting FDA clearance, and I've already talked about the UI aspect. So I think those are really the things that I'm most proud of relating to my work, but the things that I am most proud of in general are my kids sitting in the audience right now, seeing how they've grown, how they're able to speak in front of people, and the confidence that they have is really the thing that I'm most proud of. Not related to engineering, but I've already told you about the engineering related things I'm most proud of.
So now it's the audience turn to ask questions.
Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to say, like, first, Emily, I really resonated with your part saying that women are really oftentimes pushed into like product management like roles, and they're not like encouraged to go in technical roles. So I wanted to ask, like, why do you feel like it's so important that we have women in these technical roles, and we're kind of like continuing to encourage women to like push in these places?
Thank you for the question. I do think there is a difference in the way women and men perceive engineering problems. I find that men tend to really like butt heads a lot. And that's not always the case. I know I'm definitely generalizing here, but I think like we do bring a diverse perspective, not just in terms of being in the room, but also the way that we perceive problems. There's been many documented cases where you have a team developing a product for the general public, and that team that's developing it is entirely men, and so you miss out on opportunities that women might perceive in this development process. So I think having that diversity of opinion is really important. And also just showing face and being able to show that people with a desire to pursue really technical roles has someone that they can look up to. That's kind of one of my like underlying motivators for like staying in the field.
Do you mind if I add to this? Sorry. I was going to say, I think also as you'll see, gender bias when it comes to even stuff like testing. So like crash testing is more directed towards like a mannequin that's of a male body, right? Or even for stuff like FDA approval, sometimes the pool that they have is mostly men because of this, way back when where they used to say, well, you're pregnant unless proven otherwise. And so it puts you out of the pool, right? So they're designing all these things for men, and you need a woman's voice in there to say like, hey, I'm not a 180 pound, 6 foot man. I don't know if that's a good ratio or not, but like diversifying that pool as well. So having our voice in that input, I think is extremely important.
I didn't realize that was a mic. A lot of students in this room are leaders or will become leaders in the future. Do you have any advice for inclusive and effective leadership in FRC?
Yeah, I think as a leader, it's important to have like an open mind, and I think communication is very important. As I've had leaders and have been put in leadership positions, I think it's important to really understand the team you're working with and being able to communicate well and manage problems even within a team itself. You need to be able to like manage that as well. So I think communication is really important when it comes to leadership and really seeing and developing people as well. So some people see, leadership, that's going to look bad on me, but really you need to foster the people that are a part of your team. So that's extremely important.
I think creating an inclusive environment comes down to how you allow people to realize that their opinions are valued. So like a really simple question that I'm really grateful that my FRC leaders asked of me is, what do you think? Allowing people to sit at the table and be in the room, even if they aren't able to contribute anything because they don't have that experience, they need to gain that experience by being there. So inviting people to simply sit in on brainstorming sessions early on, and then encouraging them to give opinions and making sure that they feel safe to give those, I think is really valuable. So just making a conscious effort to show that everyone can contribute to whatever design process or development that you're putting together.
I definitely want to echo what you've already heard. However, and add to that as well, that creating that inclusive environment where everyone is included, where everyone is encouraged to speak is very, very important. But I do want to sort of warn people as well that what could be just a joke between friends, somebody who's not in that friend group may not take it the same way. So to just be careful to always be graciously professional when in the lab, especially in a leadership position, because people do take their cues from those leaders, and things that might actually just be a joke, that the person who it's being said to gets that it's a joke, may not be taken the same way to everyone around them. And just to be aware of that.
Hi, yeah. So, as like a woman who's like really like interested in like design, right? Like I'm like recently like learning CAD and like trying to get good at it. But of course, like, I'm in the learning stages, and I'm definitely not as good as like some like the men who are like surrounding me. And a lot of times I feel women are like constantly faced with like this pressure to not only be equal to in skill, but to be like better than in skill to men, just to kind of like feel or like be perceived as equal. So how do you kind of like cope with that constant pressure to like be at like an equal or like higher amount to be perceived like, just as good as male counterparts?
Yeah, I think that's a great one because I feel like I'm currently in the same position where, I use SolidWorks as like a very very minimally in college, and now I'm put in a position where, we've created this great product, but now we need external people to fabricate our design, and that means I need to put a CAD design together, an engineering drawing together, and, I have coworkers where they could just do it. And then I have to say, okay, well, I don't want to just ask them to do it. I want to do it. I want to learn. I think the pressure will always be there. I think a good way to cope is not necessarily beat yourself up for it, for not knowing, but use it as motivation to say, this is something I want to learn, I'm interested in learning, and I do want to become an expert or even, intermediate at it. So don't use it to beat yourself up, but just as motivation to say, okay, that's great. I have a coworker who's doing this, and I think that could be valuable for my project. Let me use the resources I can to kind of get there and be able to do that.
Did you have something?
Go ahead. I just wanted to say, don't be afraid to kind of do projects on your own to help kind of get that additional experience. And even if it's not something that ends up being built, at least that way you're gaining that familiarity, but then also, be kind to yourself and recognize that, yes, that's a very real thing, that women feel like they have to not only do something equally well as their male counterparts, but do it better to be considered. That is a very, very real thing. So be kind to yourself about it, because while that pressure exists, it shouldn't. And the way to combat that is just to gain that confidence yourself. And even better would be if you reach a point where you can teach someone else to do it. So if you're able to practice on your own and you can teach someone else, maybe somebody who hasn't thought of doing it before, you are always going to master something if you can teach it to someone else.
I want to first validate that feeling that you had. That's something that I had, and something that I still have is this fear that if I make a mistake, it might be falsely attributed to me being a woman. And that is an extra stress that I think a lot of people in the field put on themselves. I think it's great advice to kind of turn that chip on your shoulder into something that really motivates you to learn quicker. And I think it's also important to recognize that your value is not constrained to just your technical ability. I think the way that I grew in my FRC team, as well as in college and my career, is being someone who is reliable, being someone who is passionate. That is seen as a really positive attribute because it's someone who's going to learn the fastest and get to where you need to be in the technical aptitude that you need to be at. So I think in hiring, for example, they're not always going to look for someone who's the best at SolidWorks, but someone who will have the passion to learn SolidWorks as well as learn every other technical skill that they will need to be able to succeed. So just kind of using that fear and turning it somehow into motivation is a really powerful thing.
Do you guys have any strategies for dealing with feeling really burnt out? Wait, which part of the microphone? Oh, okay. Sorry.
This. Yeah, that's the microphone.
Okay. Do you have any strategies for feeling burnt out and how to get over that?
Yeah, so I think first acknowledging it, because I know for me personally, I tend to be someone who just will want to power through and keep going, especially if there's a deadline, a project, something. So I think recognizing that you've kind of hit that wall, and then find something that you really enjoy. So for me, I've played a lot of sports growing up. So I've played soccer and volleyball. And so being somewhat physical or finding that activity that will give you that release, I think is important to kind of keep in your daily, trying to even catch it before you get to the burnt out would be nice, but sometimes you don't realize it until you're in it. But yeah, I think being aware and then taking that time to say, and I think also another thing was like priorities. It seems like everything's a priority. It needs to happen right now, and saying, okay, let me prioritize it. What needs to happen now and what can wait, so that you can fit in that time for yourself.
Yeah, I think this goes back to the conversation about giving yourself grace. In engineering, you will burn out at some point. That's completely normal. And just, for me, like when I burn out, I hit a wall. And knowing that you will put so much energy into trying to get over that wall versus just taking a cheat day where you sleep a lot and you eat crap and it's totally fine. Like, you are human at the end of the day, and you need to find time to recover. And the things that you're churning towards can wait a day or a week or whatever you need to get back to where you need to be to actually solve the problem productively.
I just want to echo the acknowledging that you've hit that point is important. And yeah, that it's better if you can reach that, if you can figure it out before it happens, and try and just make sure that you take the time to decompress, to step back from whatever problem you're working on, finding something active that you can do. I really enjoy dancing, reading, snuggling with my cats. Those are things that help rejuvenate me. So find what works for you. And that is often something that is active, but not always. And don't underestimate the healing power of cat purring.
So we kind of talked about how like women, especially in like STEM fields, are like underestimated. So like, how do you kind of deal with that and like not let that image like control how you think of yourself?
Yeah, so I think, I'd say almost a double whammy for me, just because also the company and the site I work at, there's also a what would you call it, like a pedigree of sorts. So for me at our site, we have mostly or a lot of PhDs. We have a handful of masters and a few bachelor's degrees. And so I think being a woman with a bachelor's degree on the like lower end of the spectrum, it took me time to build confidence in like saying, before I used to question a lot, like, okay, I need to double check with somebody who's a higher ranking person and do all these checks with everybody. But I think building confidence in that, I can get the job done and I can do it well. There's no way to say like, if you do this, you will get confidence. I think it's just something you gain over time as you do different projects, you do different things, and then see the outcome. Like, yeah, I did complete that and it turned out great.
Yeah, building confidence is super important for combating this. I think this perception of being seen as lesser or not qualified is often something that we put on ourselves and is our self-perception rather than something that's being projected onto us. And so I think developing confidence really allows you to push past that and recognize that the comparison is happening within and not necessarily people talking down to you actively.
I am by nature a fairly stubborn person. So because I did things in a very non-traditional way in terms of going into the workforce prior to going to college, I did face a lot of that with people having very low expectations. Then when I was working at the software company in QA and tech support, most people assumed that I had already been to college, even though I hadn't, just because of the way that I worked and the way that I talked and the way that I acted. They just assumed I was 5 years older than I was. And then it was a little weird when I went to college and was suddenly 5 years older than everyone. And that was a little bit of a difficult transition for me because suddenly I was around people younger when I was always used to being the youngest and used to being around people who are older than me. That was a big transition for me and a little bit difficult. And I found that befriending the grad students when I was an undergraduate, because they had a little bit more life experience under their belts and I could relate to them a little better. So I've lost track of what the question was, but find the people that you connect with and then just try and develop that confidence yourself with you and with the people who you can connect with.
A lot of time, like our male counterparts, like in workplaces, can find themselves being like very straightforward, you know, like always like putting their foot forward in different projects. A lot of times not really in like a respectful way because, you know, sometimes men have less social awareness. So why is it so important that as women, like we learn to like assert ourselves and kind of not be afraid of like always having to like be like super kind, respectful, and kind of like learning to respect our own boundaries in ways like we're learning to like assert ourselves? Like, why is that so important?
Yeah, so I think it's extremely important because you always want to get your point across. You want to be taken seriously. So I know for me, and again, with the confidence thing, it's also something that you just build up over time. It doesn't always happen for everyone naturally. And I tend to be more on the passive, like, I'm fine, I go with the flow, smile and nod, I'm good. And I had that like perception at work where it was like, oh, if Alicia kind of says something back, like, whoa, that's a lot. And not even that there's a bad intonation with it or anything, but just, you know, there is this expectation that you're, you know, smile and nod. And so I think when meetings would happen, that's where I was like, you know what, I need to speak up. Maybe I don't agree with this, or I do have a question about this. And I think people started taking me more seriously, or even coming to me for advice, as opposed to seeing me as like a bystander. So I think it helps people see you in a different light. And again, it's about being assertive and not rude and saying like, hey, you said this to me, but still being respectful, but getting your point across and letting them know that you're there, and also like an equal counterpart to a lot of people that you work with.
Yeah, I think engineering is a field where you are definitely perceived as more competent if you're louder and less competent if you're not. And that is something that I've received as feedback as well. You know, being like a quieter person early in my career is like, you need to speak up during meetings, because even if you do have opinions on it and you do have the intellect to back it up, that will not be perceived and come across to other people if you don't speak up about it. So I think like, if you don't have that confidence early on, honestly, like, fake it till you make it. I think it's something that works. Like, a lot of people, more than you think, who are speaking up at work don't necessarily have 100% confidence in what they're saying, but they will say it anyway. And I think kind of learning to push past that doubt and say it anyway will benefit you more than it will hurt you. I think that's also a study that's been done, is like women will tend to only say something if they absolutely think it's correct and they've double checked it many times, versus men will just say it. And I think just saying it and kind of going against that nature will benefit you in the long run.
One of the things that I'm really glad that I did in high school was theater. And the reason for that is because that constantly getting up in front of people and talking is useful for everything throughout life. If you can have those experiences when you're younger, to just push past that fear of talking in front of people, and that is going to help you. And yes, fake it till you make it on the confidence, because the more timid you are, the less knowledgeable you sound. So when you are an expert on something, speak up. Even when you're not an expert, still be involved in the conversation, because you'll get there. You just need more time and practice.
might have a follow-up on that one. Sorry. Sorry. You guys, when I go first, you guys have great things after, and it makes me think about something. Because I think one of the other questions you asked earlier was something along the lines of why it's important for women to be on technical teams and stay technical. And then so that goes in not just being on the team, but being vocal on the team. So I've mentioned before about, this patch that we're working with, and the team putting it together were men, which was great. They had a great design. But the first question my colleague and I had were, okay, cool, how does this fit on a woman? We're built differently. There's, it doesn't, they're like, well, we didn't think about that. Okay. And luckily being on the design and prototyping, I'm like, great, let's redesign the whole thing because this doesn't make sense, right? So being vocal about it too, because with that means, okay, if I leave it how it is, I have to ask for a male volunteer, I have to do all the studies on them, coordinate with their time, versus, okay, if it's made for men and women, I can test it, they can test it, it can be used universally. So I think, had we not spoke up, these types of ideas don't always are in the forefront of their mind. So yeah, we need to be on those technical teams, but also like speaking up as well.
Okay, so I think like mentioned before, there's like a lot of like push for women to go into like logistical fields or like not like STEM related fields in general. Like how do you kind of like make yourself feel like you fit in, even though it's like not like an ideal position that like a woman might be seen in?
We'll change it up.
That's an interesting question. And I think that if it's something that you're passionate about, then that passion is what makes you fit in. But that's all I have for the moment. I might come back.
Yeah, I think it's something along the lines of that, as if you are confident that you want to pursue a technical field, then don't let yourself be discouraged from it. Mm-hmm. For me, I almost thought of pursuing a different engineering degree than mechanical because I thought like maybe I'm not naturally built for this. And I did find that doing managerial or logistic tasks was easier for me than like more technical tasks that I felt I didn't have as much intuition towards. But I think intuition is a bit overrated, and I think you develop that through experience, and that's something that I'm so glad, like a professor in my freshman year said, is you will develop that ability later on. So yeah, fake it till you make it. Just have confidence that if you don't feel that you fit into the role now, that will very likely change later once you invest time into it.
Yeah, I think the fake it till you make it really does help, or even just understanding like, okay, I might be in here and I might not be an expert, but I'm allowed that time to kind of grow. I know in like a lot of the positions that I had, it wasn't like I came in and, I went through their job description and said, okay, I can already do all of this. Most of it I had to learn on the job. And so, yeah, there was that moment of like, am I underqualified? Can I do all of this? Can I learn this? So whether you feel like you fit in or not, I feel like there's always going to be different groups and, different learnings. But if it is something that you truly want, you will fit in. It just takes some time to get that feeling of getting rid of imposter syndrome. That's real.
What's something niche in your job or like in your field or in a project that you worked on that you were super excited in and super interested in that you don't really get to talk about much?
I don't know if I have this one yet.
I don't know yet.
Yeah, we're like, that's a good one. Something niche. Oh man, I'm really, you seem like you have one.
I don't know.
Maybe I lack a filter and overshare because I don't know that there's something that I haven't talked about in general, but I do live and breathe diabetes. And there was a time recently where I was having lunch with a friend, and two of her friends were there before who I'd never met. And we started talking about what I do and the closed loop insulin pump system and type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. And it turned out that one of the people I was having lunch with had type 2 diabetes. And so we started talking about CGMs, and we were talking about the different ways that different carbohydrates affect the body because it's different from everyone, which is why everyone with diabetes should have a CGM. And I'll get off my soapbox. But he said to me afterwards that it was the first time he'd ever talked about diabetes in a social setting. That it was something that no one talked about in his family. I've talked to another person who had type 2 diabetes, who everyone in his family had type 2 diabetes, but no one talked about it. He was the first person in his family to talk about it. So I guess what I would say is don't be afraid to talk about things, because you might find out that you have things in common or that you have information that you can share with other people that they might not otherwise be talking about. And you can have these phenomenal discussions where people are learning different aspects of things because you took the time to bring it up and talk about it, and don't be afraid to do that.
Maybe not a niche field, but I think like pursuing mechanical engineering has taught me that like really mundane things actually have a lot of thought to them. Like I'm staring at this water bottle and it's like a very simple thing, right? But somebody thought of the shape, of the diameter, of the material choice, of all of these ribs here in order to like optimize this product. So I think something niche is that a lot of everyday objects have quite a lot of thought behind them, more so than you'd think. And I think getting into the career and learning about the engineering decisions that come behind every single product will make things that are normal seem more niche, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was gonna say sometimes with larger companies, there's not always a niche. Everything's kind of like broad. But I think again, kind of going into like the med tech field, maybe more niche at my site, I guess I would say, not necessarily a project, but a lot of the things that we do are kind of, they come in the lab for a little bit and then they go out. We're either doing like testing, fabricating, and then it's gone. So with our med tech, there are certain things where, you know, if we want to get a biosignal, we need consistency in the thickness, the material that we're using, the electrical properties. And so using my previous background in quality, was when my manager was like, well, great, if we're sending these out for customers and they're gonna wanna test them, and whether you send them out to somebody in Europe or somebody here in Silicon Valley, we need consistency. And I was like, great, I've done quality and a quality control system, so I can implement that for anything that we're sending out. So if somebody comes back and says, I have, you know, these patches with this ID number, I can go back and say, okay, well, this was the production date, this is when we screen printed it, this is when we did the adhesive layer, and break it down to figure out, okay, is it working properly or not? So I think being able to use, you know, whether you're at the same company and job for a long period of time or jumping around, you learn something that you can always bring to the next one.
So I know you guys have been in the industry for a bit, so you probably found that like in a team setting, not everyone like always agrees with each other. So I guess my question is like, do you guys have any advice for like conflict resolution or just like getting to a point of agreement in a team setting?
My advice would be, first and foremost, to always assume good intent, especially with written written communication, it's very easy to misinterpret people's words. So starting with assuming good intent is always good, because chances are even people you disagree with, even people who are more difficult to work with, don't mean to be. So that would be the first thing. And the second thing would be to look for the things that you do appreciate about those people that you struggle to work with, because that can help you to just work past some of those more difficult things about communicating with them. So yeah, to assume good intent and to look for connections that you can make with those people, even if it's a little bit different from what you do work-wise, to be able to take a breath and stay calm while you communicate with them.
Yeah, I think echoing that, recognizing that very likely the people who you're conflicting with are working on the same goal and the same project. You're trying to get towards the best thing that you can build, and maybe spinning that towards thinking that diverse opinions will ultimately get you to the best product is a good perspective to have. I think fortunately working in a technical field, there sometimes can be right or wrong answers. So challenging people when they come up with an opinion to back it up with some data or some calculations or something like that can help you get to a more objective right answer.
Let's see, I think for conflict resolution and also just working in teams in general, whether you're an individual contributor or a leader in any sorts, I think it's understanding that it's not like a copy and paste with everybody. You have to understand people communicate differently, people will interpret things differently, and knowing that maybe the way you approach person A may not be the same way that you're gonna approach person B. So being able to understand them so that you guys can kind of, again, find that common goal and work together. I think hopefully most of the time you're able to kind of handle it between you two, but don't be afraid if it ever does escalate to a point where you're not finding resolution, to bring in a third party to just say, we need a mediator, it's nothing bad. I think sometimes mediation sounds so bad, but whether it's another teacher, a friend that maybe you find is somewhat neutral that can say, oh no, I think what she meant was this, or nothing gets misconstrued going back and forth between the conversation. I think that could be helpful in getting something productive out of it.
Do you guys ever work with people who really struggle taking accountability, and how do you guys go about communicating with them and interacting?
Yeah, so I think that's a hard one because again, it's, you don't want to start a conflict, but I think being kind in the way you approach them, and accountability can be hard. It's a difficult one to manage because some people do take it very personally, and although as neutral as you try to approach the situation, it can still go sideways. So I think being able to have calm conversations, and like you said, whether there's data or something that can back it up, whether it's a decision that was made or a calculation, having something like written or factual kind of helps with that, but trying not to be too accusatory as you approach them. That will put them in the defense mode. So keeping it neutral and just saying, I'm just trying to find the root cause of what happened, as opposed to pointing fingers. I think the approach is important.
Yeah, I think it's easy to avoid accountability if roles are not really clearly defined. So documentation really helps with that, making a to-do list or we need to get this done list, and then very actively saying it is your role to do this and mine to do that. so that there's something to reference at the end of the day. Because sometimes a lack of accountability is actually just a lack of understanding the expectations. So like making an effort from the beginning to try to manage that can maybe help in the future.
Yeah, I'll just echo what they said as well, that making sure that roles are clearly defined and expectations are defined is really important. If the person you feel isn't taking accountability is in a position of power, that can be difficult and that can be frustrating. And I just want to validate that feeling if that's where you were, where the question stemmed from. That is a difficult situation, and bringing in third parties if necessary is always a good option. That if, as long as you're staying calm when handling the situation, if that doesn't work, then asking for help is important.
Another question I actually had was, like, what are some like meaningful connections you've made with like other women like in the STEM field, and kind of like how have those like allowed you to kind of like grow further? Like, why is it so important that we like continue to support and like connect with other women in STEM?
Yeah, I think it's important, as you mentioned, kind of mentorships and stuff like this. So I think also finding a variety of network. So I have colleagues, I have people in higher positions, people at the same company, people at different companies. So I think there's times where I'll just contact them like, okay, I just need, another perspective on this. And it's nice to get different views from people in different positions, people with different jobs, people with different work. So I think having a very diverse network is extremely important, and having them for, if you are having that imposter syndrome or questioning yourself, or you have an instance at work, or you want to say, this happened, am I being undermined, or anything like that. I think being able to bounce off ideas, having this network can be useful for that.
One benefit of being a minority in engineering is that I think it brings women together a lot to form those communities and those groups. And I think it's really valuable to kind of have people to ground you in that rock at the end of the day, because they have the best understanding of the issues that you go through. And so I think just having people to even just vent to and find community in is really valuable.
Community is always so important, and having those people that you can reach out to no matter what is going on has been very important to me, both with work and just in life. So having people that I can reach out to if I just need to check in and see how things are going, like, that is important. And I mentioned the two people who were the first hires that I was involved in interviewing. The three of us still have our own Slack thread that is very, very active today, just the way it was 4 years ago, and 5 years ago now when they were hired. So yeah, community and just keeping those connections going is important.
I just wanted to ask a follow-up to that question. At your organizations, do you have, or anywhere else besides SWE, do you have any other women's networks at your companies that you belong to, or do you belong to any other women's networks outside of your company?
So our company actually does, besides SWE externally, but internally there's I'm going to butcher what the name is, but it is a collective women's, and it's not just women engineering, it's kind of just a women's at DuPont kind of network. That is very valuable to kind of, again, keep in touch, build a network, whether it's kind of within your team or outside your team. I think it's also great. We do have a few males who join too, which I think is kind of nice because some of them are in more leadership roles. So they're part of the discussions as we're talking about, issues that we're having or things that we want to do or what we might find valuable to, have somebody from another perspective, but see them also participate and support us in that way, I think is really nice to have.
Yes, we do have a Woman in Tesla group. I'm wearing the shirt today. It's nothing super serious. We grab lunch once a month. We do joint work sessions. We have donuts every once in a while. Just having that social aspect in the workplace is really nice to take a break from all of the technical work. And so, yeah, we're starting off and we're trying to get more active. So, and yeah, we also have a similar thing where we have male executives get involved with the organization. And I think that helps a lot with advocating for us and getting more budgeting and just kind of growing it in general.
Tide Pool is a very small nonprofit. Like, it feels big that we have 50 people now. And we don't have a specific organization for women at the company. But I do know that our VP of product is someone who I meet with regularly. I host a support group for families with kids with diabetes, and she often joins in if other people aren't around during that time. And I do know that she is part of an organization for women in tech. And that's something that she has reached out and been part of. And she's been a very big part of why we've been able to expand. At the time that I started at Tide Pool, she was a contractor and was working just sometimes on little aspects, and now she's the VP of product. So it's wonderful seeing that growth and knowing that a lot of the women who are on the executive board of the company now didn't start off in that position. They worked their way up to that, and seeing that growth and knowing, for the people who are joining the company now, they can see that women leadership in the executive board, and it's important.
This is like a bit of a change of topic, but what is something unexpected that you guys learned either in like your experience in industry or maybe in school?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question a little bit louder?
Oh yeah, sorry. So what's something unexpected that you guys learned in either industry, like your experience working, or maybe in school, like university? Or like getting your degree.
Well, my degree only somewhat relates to what I'm actually doing for a career. The biology aspect of it, the focus on endocrinology, that applies. But something unexpected. I think it was unexpected to me just how much communication skills and writing skills are important in any field. And I remember in college, I don't know how this person had managed to take all classes that didn't require a research paper. And we were asked to do a research paper, which was completely expected because it's an upper division biology class in college. Of course you're going to do research papers. And they were so shocked. And they were so worried But those are skills, communication skills, writing skills. Those are skills that you need no matter what you're doing. And it doesn't matter how technical a field is, the ability to communicate what you're trying to say and what your opinions are is always going to be important.
I think one thing unexpected was just how diverse of the topics in mechanical engineering is. Like my partner, he's also a mechanical engineer, and his day-to-day is completely different from mine. I have no idea what he does, and it's vice versa. And I think that was kind of unexpected in my degree, is like, you know, there's so many unique fields, like material science, and then you learn fluid mechanics, and then you learn heat transfer, and they're not related at all in the sense that it's hard to kind of build off of them, and that's what makes the degree difficult. And then there's this aha moment when you actually go into your career and you realize that the product you're developing uses a little bit of everything. And I think that's kind of unexpected, is realizing like, whoa, it's such a diverse field, what the heck? And then like actually coming full circle and realizing that it all makes sense in the end.
So I'd probably start with saying how many people think that chemical engineering is the same as chemists. People just see chemical and they think it's the same thing. But I think communication is an important one in the sense that I think not the same for everybody, but sometimes even at the interview process. I know for DuPont, as a contractor, I went through multiple rounds of interviews, and then once I was converted from a contractor to full-time, I had to give a technical presentation to then, again, kind of, they want to make sure that not only do you know what you're doing technically and how to do it, but then can you present that to a team well enough. And I think something unexpected, again, is kind of the diversity that you have. So I think as chemical engineering, I never thought I would be collecting biosignals and reading ECG data and how to get into medical devices. And I think what's unexpected is, you know, when you're graduating either high school or college, I don't think at any of those points was I like, this is the job I want and I know I'm going to do it. I think it's finding that passion on the job sometimes. This platform was new. It wasn't even at the company when I started. And since then, I think I've, attended all of the local conferences related to wearable technology, anything med tech related, and finding all of a sudden that spark again has been kind of like a new inspiration in the last year or so.
And then do our moderators have any other questions they want to add?
I have a question.
Okay.
So how were your interviews, and if you had the chance to redo them, what are some tips, or what can you do differently?
So interviews will definitely change on the company and the role. So I think at the winery with a smaller group and starting in quality control, quality assurance, I think I had a round of phone interviews and then an in-person interview, half technical, half like behavioral. And then again for DuPont was kind of a round of phone interviews as a contractor. So the first one was with a recruiter, the second one was with a technical manager, and then a third round with 3 engineers, and then on-site interview after that. And then being converted was an interview with 3 engineers, and then a presentation to the engineering team on a technical topic where they could ask any questions after. I think anything that I would change would probably be, again, confidence. I think sometimes you get so nervous and it feels like I have to nail it and I have to be perfect, and you put all this pressure on yourself. And I think as long as you feel prepared and confident in what you're presenting, I think that'll come across with them and being able to answer the questions that they have.
Yeah, similar interview process. There's a screening with the recruiter, and then you just go through several rounds of technical interviews. There were some that were virtual, and then eventually we did an on-site where I did a presentation on a technical project that I had done before. I think something that they really valued in my interview experience was like curiosity. and someone who's really interested in the products we were working on, as well as someone who is just easy to talk to, I think is very underrated in the interview process. And there's kind of those qualitative aspects that are important to hone in on. So I think practicing a balance of like behavioral and technical interviews is valuable, even if your role is highly technical.
I don't know if I remember that much about my interview process with Tide Pool. One of the most memorable interviews that I remember having was actually for the software company that made graphic design software. I did the first interview for that in the dark room at the print shop where I worked at. I took a whole bunch of work that needed to be done into the dark room and made the phone call from the dark room. And that included every once in a while saying, hold on just a minute, and like using making a metal plate from the designs that we had, and because the machine was going to be loud and they wouldn't hear what I was saying. And they were patient with me because, again, it was in the same field. And that was also the same company where they told me I didn't have a car at the time. I had to travel from Boulder to Denver to go to the interview, and they told me they would want me to come back. And I said, I have a job. I can't take another day off work to come back to do this. We're very busy. And they were able to schedule for me to come back and meet with the manager after hours, because that was what I was able to do. And I think honestly, that's probably one of the reasons why I got that job, because they realized that I was a very motivated person and that I was going to be a good employee, because I wasn't willing to throw my other company under the bus just because I had something that was maybe better on the horizon. I have done more interviews recently than I so that's more fresh in my mind. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for how do people think. I'm looking for how creative are they in figuring out what a problem will be. So I'm generally not giving technical interviews. I'm giving interviews to figure out how you think. And many of the people that I work with now are familiar with the toaster questions, because if something's wrong, it was just, oh, this is a way that you can just, how many problems can they figure out? What could be wrong? And think of how they approach problems. One of the most interesting things I had as an interviewer was one of the people I interviewed was not from the United States, had not grown up in our culture. And I didn't find out until the end of the interview that he had never used a toaster. It just wasn't something that was used where he grew up. He had never used one. And that made the entire interview even more impressive, because he had come up with some phenomenal things and a different way of looking at things than I had expected. And that was just exactly what I was looking for.
He has one more question.
Oh, one more question.
What did you guys do in high school to get some experience with engineering?
I didn't. I did theater in high school. I did ski patrol in high school. And I was very, very busy. So I wish that there had been FRC at my high school. That didn't even exist back then. It would have been something I would have been interested in. But yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, I already mentioned. I did FRC.
I'm kind of more like you probably. So yeah, I played a lot of sports. So I took like the AP classes, and I think we had drafting. Unfortunately, they messed up my classes, and instead of drafting, I got put in public speaking, which valuable, but probably scared the heck out of me. But no, I actually played a lot of sports, so a lot of people don't know that I was actually trying to go more of like the collegiate soccer route and get a scholarship for that. But yeah, ended up not following through with that and kind of sticking with academics. So yeah, sports were a big part of my high school experience and college.
We started a girls' soccer team.
Okay. And then we'll take one more question, and then I think we'll start closing out.
Okay, so I think you guys all kind of mentioned, like, in STEM especially, there's, like, a lot of, like, setbacks, like, ideas getting scrapped and stuff. So, like, how do you think you've dealt with that in the past, and, like, how would you, like, improve and, like, deal with, like, setbacks in, like, the future?
So setbacks are something that happen in life in general. And the important thing to remember is that every setback comes with an opportunity. And I think just holding on to that silver lining, and just, it's hard to remember that when those setbacks happen, but just the more we can repeat it, the more it reinforces every setback is a new opportunity. And it might be something that you hadn't thought of before that turns out to be your absolute passion. And that very definitely explains what I'm doing today, because it's not something that I would have originally thought, and what was a somewhat devastating diagnosis in our family turned into an opportunity, and hold on to those opportunities.
I think we are more defined by how we respond to the setbacks rather than the setbacks themselves. And when we make mistakes, it's easy to dwell on it. And I think investing that energy into dwelling on it, which is not productive, rather than pushing yourself to just do the best you can to address the setback, is something that we can be more conscious of doing.
Yeah, I think setbacks can happen at any stage, whether it's small with a little experiment with a project or something larger. So I think, again, being able to find the positivity in it, even though it's hard in the moment. So, if it's something small with a project and saying, okay, although that ended up not working, what did I learn? Does that mean I can't use this pressure and temperature? Okay, what if I use this instead? It can be a learning opportunity, and whether it's also you moving forward. So as I've mentioned, med tech, starting at our company, it was very exciting. And at the same time, we got news that with some splits of the company, we're not going to have med tech anymore. And so I was like, well, that's devastating. How can we bring it back? Or, maybe we're not doing the materials, maybe we're doing the electronics portion of it. And so it allows you to find new ways to pivot. And as you've mentioned, being scrappy or being creative, it gives you that opportunity to find what the next step is. Although, trying to recoup quickly and then looking at the opportunity.
Okay, so I think that brings, Jen.
That's it for the panel. So Team 2854 and Team 2813 have some cards that we want to give out to you guys. And for the audience, we have some drinks and snacks right there. So you guys could be free to eat it and drink it. So yeah, that's the end of it.
I